Welcome, art enthusiasts, to another exhilarating episode of Brushstroke Rules.
That's right, where the past meets the present and opinions collide like colours on a canvas. I'm Daisy, and alongside me, as always, is Lexi.
Pleasure to be here. Today, folks, we have a riveting debate that's sure to spark some heated discourse.
Indeed, we're diving headfirst into the vibrant world of 19th century Paris and the rise of exhibition culture throughout it.
For such a well-known and widely discussed topic, it's taken us a while to choose 19th century Paris, don't you think, Daisy?
It has indeed. It's quite fascinating, isn't it? With so many pivotal moments in art history, it can be challenging to narrow down our focus. But there's something about 19th century Paris that beckons us. It was a melting pot of artistic innovation, cultural upheaval, and societal transformation. So, while it may have taken us a while to get here, I believe our timing couldn't be more perfect.
So, with that being said, our chosen debate title for this week is The Societal Impact of the 19th Century Parisian Exhibition Culture, Progression or Preservation?
A topic as rich and layered as a masterpiece by Monet or Renoir. So, essentially, we'll be exploring whether the rise of the exhibition culture in Paris during the 1800s propelled society forward or merely preserved the status quo.
Exactly that. Joining us are two esteemed guests, each bringing their unique perspective to the debate. On one side, we have art curator Jack Pickthorne, an advocate for the preservation camp. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to delve into this topic, and as an avid listener of the podcast myself, I'm eager to finally be part of a brushstroke brawl debate.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Would you mind telling the listeners a bit about who you are and what you do?
Certainly. So I'm one of Paris's Musée d'Orsay's many art curators, and for those that aren't too sure what that means, I essentially plan and organise art exhibitions at the gallery, selecting and arranging artworks to create narratives and attempt to provide an engaging experience for visitors that can be enjoyed and understood by those who know lots about art and for those who don't know so much.
Amazing! I must say, curation has always fascinated me, because as a consumer of these exhibitions, it's easy to forget about the people behind the scenes that, like you said, provide the narrative and engagement, especially for those that go into those exhibitions not knowing a huge amount about art.
Honestly, couldn't have put it better myself.
You're both very kind. I knew I made the right decision coming on here. Might have to make it a regular thing.
Oh, we'd be delighted. I've been trying to think of a replacement co-host.
Now, come on. We both know I bring the most listeners.
So, Jack, you're British yourself.
I'm proud.
So what drove you to curate in Paris, given the plethora of galleries over here?
Well, I did in fact used to work over here on the more commercial side of art as a consultant for an auction house. And whilst I loved it, gallery work has always fascinated me much more, especially from a creative standpoint. And I mean, honestly, if the Musée d'Orsay calls, you answer.
Understandably.
And my love for French art specifically tempted me even more. And whilst, of course, the artefacts kept there are worldwide, just having the access to places like the Musée Marmottan Monet and his house in Giverny, as an art historian, it's honestly like a kid in a sweet shop over here.
God, maybe we make the big move, Daisy.
Well, we might think different after introducing our second guest for today's debate.
Welcoming our opposing side, ready to brawl against Jack, we have the Saatchi Gallery of London's exhibition officer, Katie Tansey, who champions the progression argument. Welcome, Katie.
Delighted to be here, ready to defend the importance of progression in the art world.
And we're so delighted to have you, Katie. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Any excuse to. So I am the exhibitions officer of the Saatchi Gallery in London, and I have been for 4 years now. And what that means is I essentially source exhibits, research artists, select works, and also the not so exciting stuff like sourcing loans and running alongside the gallery's curators.
Oh, I can already feel a brawl coming on.
I'm only messing. But I do work primarily with curators, so I should be able to find your weaknesses, Jack.
Fabulous, because I'm not sure I know them myself.
Oh, it's going to be a good one, Lexi.
Who's got the popcorn?
With our guests primed and our topic set, it's time to unlock the vaults of history and unleash the brushstroke brawls.
So, by the sounds of it, our two guests today are familiar with the ins and outs of how we debate on brushstroke brawls. But for any new listeners at home, here is how it will work.
So we like to keep our brawls here as light-hearted as possible.
Gosh, maybe we ought to change the name.
Yes, so more of an open conversation with two divided opinions and a little bit of heat.
Brushstroke bickering could work.
Oh, shush. Each side will deliver a brief opening statement outlining their position on the chosen debate topic, which, just to remind you all, is the societal impact of the 19th century Parisian exhibition culture, progression or preservation.
And then following this, we dive headfirst into it and never really know where we'll end up.
But it's always good, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you're all still listening, so it must be.
Stay tuned, folks. This debate promises to be as lively as the Parisian salons of yore.
So, as always, we allow each guest an artwork to support their argument, which will be described to you listeners by our in-house visual analyst, Phoebe Neame. But, as always, please feel free to look up a picture to view alongside her analysis to properly get a feel of the painting.
Yes, so Katie, what is your chosen artwork for the day that you think displays how the rise of the exhibition culture in Paris during the 19th century propelled society forward?
So I have chosen a personal favourite of mine and a very well-known painting, which is Edward Manet's Olympia of 1863.
Oh, what a raunchy oil-on-canvas creation! Phoebe, would you be so kind to visually describe the work for our audio listeners?
Of course, what a work. So this, as you said, is Edward Manet's Olympia. It was painted in 1863 and today can be seen in the Musée d'Orsay, whilst originally it was exhibited in the Paris Salon. The painting shows a reclining nude woman lying on a bed. She appears relaxed and comfortable as she gazes out at the viewer. She has fair skin, her figure is unidealized and plump. The composition is set in a dimly lit room with a dark background. The bed she lies on has crumpled white sheets and provides a stark contrast to her naked body, which has a slight yellowy tone to it. The focal point of the painting is the nude woman who occupies the centre of the canvas. She wears few pieces of jewellery, a black ribbon around her neck, a bracelet on her wrist, and a flower in her hair. Her jewellery insinuates her role in society. For example, choker necklaces were originally worn by prostitutes. Olympia was a common name for a French prostitute in this era as well. The woman's pose is provocative, with one arm resting on her hip and the other lying across her body, covering her genitals, showing if you want to see, you will need to pay. Her facial expression is confident and confrontational as she meets the viewer's gaze with a bold stare, almost making it seem as if you were her next customer. The black cat in the bottom left corner appears startled, adding to this idea that someone has just walked into the room, and the tail of the cat juxtaposes her role in society through its phallic nature. Standing next to the bed is a black female servant who holds a bouquet in her hand. The green curtain appears to be being drawn back, revealing Olympia to the viewer. Manet employs a muted colour palette dominated by shades of brown, black and white, with subtle pops of colour in the flowers and the woman's skin tone. Manet's brushwork is bold and expressive, which we would call, in technical terms, impasto, with visible brushstrokes adding texture and depth to the painting. The composition hints at the sense of realism and immediacy, which we can be seen through Manet's portfolio.
Ah, Phoebe, you amaze me every time.
What a fabulous and detailed description for our listeners.
I hope this has helped, Katie. And following Phoebe's vision analysis, would you mind telling us why you have chosen this Manet masterpiece?
Well, I mean, for me, I think it perfectly encapsulates the progression in societal norms and attitudes of the 19th century in Paris by challenging those traditional conventions, sparking controversy and paving that way for modernism in art, which we so much love, appreciate and consume today, specifically within the exhibition culture. Manet's rejected previously held conventions on not only artistic technique, but on sexuality, gender and race.
I'm so excited to hear more about this from you, Katie. I mean, it's a known work, like you said, but I hope to hear some new and exciting takes from you.
As I'm sure we will. Now, Jack, a lot to follow on from. What is your chosen work of art for today's brawl in line with your preservation argument?
So, to support my preservation argument, I've chosen Alexander Cabanel's Birth of Venus, painted in 1863.
What an ethereal choice, Jack. Phoebe, can we have some analysis on this oil painting?
Certainly. So this was painted during the 19th century, a time of shifting attitudes towards classical, mythology, femininity and beauty. So this painting takes a very traditional composition and more academic compared to Botticelli's Birth of Venus. Here, Venus appears very statuesque and idealised, with elongated proportions of typical academic painting. Venus is depicted here with an idealised beauty, flawless skin and delicate features which emphasise an ethereal glow. Her pose accentuates her curves and she gazes directly at the viewer, showing a sense of confidence and allure. This depiction of Venus focuses solely on the figure herself and how she is presented as an object of beauty and desire. The colour palette leans towards richer, deeper tones with luxurious and vibrant hues to reflect the taste of 19th century salon audience. We can see a contrast between the warm tones of Venus's skin and the cool blues and greens of the sea and sky in the background. Cabanel was a prominent academic painter, and his style reflects the emphasis of meticulous detail and technical perfection, characteristic of academic art. Every fold of fabric and ripple of water and strand of hair is rendered with precision and clarity.
Once again, fabulous work, Phoebe.
It's safe to say both Jack and Katie have chosen fabulous paintings. And you know what that means, Lexi?
Are we ready to brawl? Welcome back, brushstroke brawlers. Our two esteemed guests are geared up and ready.
To remind all of our listeners, our debate topic today is the societal impact of the 19th century Parisian exhibition culture, comparing progression, argued by Katie,
Against preservation, argued by Jack.
So, Jack, you agree that the rise of exhibition culture in 19th century Paris saw a plethora of modern and progressive artworks.
I do indeed.
But you believe that this was merely to preserve the status quo of the salon, meeting the progressive expectations of Paris's changing society, as opposed to actually believing these paintings should have been accepted.
Completely, Daisy. The Birth of Venus by Cabanel is a prime example of how exhibition culture in the 19th century Paris aimed to preserve traditional values and uphold societal norms. This painting, with its classical subject matter and idealised portrayal of beauty, was widely accepted to be the conservative art establishment of the time. Cabanel's meticulous attention to detail and adherence to academic conventions ensured that his work aligned with the tastes and expectations of the salon audience. By championing artworks like The Birth of Venus, the exhibition culture of the 19th century Paris sought to maintain the status quo and resist the tide of modernism and societal change.
Fascinating perspective, Jack. Now, Katie, I believe you have a different take on the matter. You argue that exhibition culture in 19th century Paris propelled society forward through artistic progression. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely, Lexi. The Olympia by Manet challenges these traditional norms and conventions of 19th century Parisian society. Unlike Cabanel's Venus, which conforms to the ideals of classical beauty, Olympia presents a more modern, confrontational portrayal of the female form. Manet's bold brushwork and unidealised depiction of the nude woman sparked such controversy and pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in art. By daring to depict a contemporary scene with honesty and authenticity, Manet paved the way for artistic innovation and societal change. The exhibition culture of 19th century Paris provided a platform for artists like Manet to challenge the status quo and push those boundaries of artistic expression.
Oh, it seems like we have a clash of ideologies here. Jack, how do you respond to Katie's argument that Manet's Olympia represents progress rather than preservation?
Well, I can definitely appreciate Katie's perspective, but I must respectfully disagree. Manet's Olympia may have challenged traditional norms, but ultimately it did little to dismantle the existing power structures and the societal hierarchies of the 19th century Paris. The painting's confrontational depiction of a nude woman, juxtaposed with the submissive figure of the servant, reinforces gender and class disparities rather than challenging them. In contrast, Cabanel's Birth of Venus celebrates classical beauty and mythology, serving as a reminder of France's cultural heritage and artistic tradition. By preserving traditional values and artistic conventions, exhibitions like the Salon contributed to social stability and cohesion in 19th century Paris.
Katie, how do you respond to Jack's argument that Manet's Olympia failed to challenge societal norms effectively?
While I understand Jack's perspective, I completely believe that Manet's Olympia was a catalyst for societal change, precisely because it challenged the status quo. By depicting a contemporary scene with honesty, Manet confronted viewers with the realities of modern life, and he forced them to question their assumptions and biases. The painting's confrontational gaze and bold composition challenged traditional notions of femininity and power, paving the way for future generations of artists to explore new and innovative forms of expression. In this sense, Manet's Olympia represents progress rather than preservation, as it challenged societal norms and pushed the boundaries of artistic expression.
Wow, well, both compelling arguments. Seems we've reached an impasse. Jack, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I simply want to emphasise the importance of preserving our cultural heritage and artistic tradition, while progress is essential, we must not forget the value of tradition and the lessons it can teach us about our past. However, I'd just like to point out that Olympia is in the Musée d'Orsay, and seeing as I'm a curator, I will never be anti-Olympia.
And Katie, any closing remarks from you?
Well, thanks for that, Jack. And I do believe that progress is inevitable and necessary for societal growth. By challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries of artistic expression, we can create a more inclusive and dynamic society that embraces diversity and innovation.
Well, very well said, both of you. And stay tuned as we will now head over onto our call of the day, where one of you can have the opportunity to brawl the brawlers themselves. So, on this part of the episode, we usually allow listeners to call in and ask the brawlers a question.
Yes, so today we welcome Ed from Devon. Ed, are you with us?
Hi Brawlers, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how these paintings continue to resonate with contemporary audiences, what you guys perceive their relevance to be in today's art world, and what you think they symbolise or represent in the context of societal values, artistic expression, and the 21st century as a whole. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And finally, Jack, I'm a massive fan of your work and thought your curation of the James Whistler exhibition back in 2022 was really inspired.
Wow, great question, Ed. Jack, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, sure. Cabanel's The Birth of Venus stands as a prime example of academic art during the Salon era in the 19th century. It embodies a return to classical themes and beauty ideals popular at the time. The painting's romantic portrayal of Venus, emerging from the sea, captivated audience with its mythical charm and sensuality. While some criticise it for being too traditional and adhering closely to established artistic rules, many still appreciated its technical brilliance and timeless depiction of classical beauty. Its lasting impact lies in its portrayal of timeless myths and classical aesthetics, which continue to inspire artists and captivate viewers today.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you there. All the work of that time does and will always hold relevance to us as an audience. And I think it was such an influential time, so it's hard not to. And I think Olympia in particular continues to captivate contemporary audiences due to that revolutionary approach that Monet had in portraying the female nude. I think he deliberately departed from idealised beauty, and his bold depiction of a self-assured, confrontational woman challenges that traditional notion of femininity and power dynamics. In today's art world, where conversations around gender, agency, and representation are prominent, Olympia remains such a powerful statement. In the context of today, in the 21st century, societal values, Olympia symbolises that ongoing struggle for gender equality and that reclamation of female autonomy. Olympia's gaze is both direct and unapologetic, and that challenges the viewer's gaze, inviting a sense of discourse on that objectification of women and the agency of the depicted subject. In contemporary art, the painting serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities surrounding female representation and that need to dismantle entrenched power structures that we still have today.
Thank you so much to all of our listeners for tuning into this week's podcast on the societal impact of the 19th century Parisian exhibition culture. We all found it incredibly insightful and hope you did too. A very special thank you to Katie and Jack for their brilliant discussion between progression or preservation. I found Katie's point on Manet's Olympia sparking controversy, not just through its subject matter, but also due to his artistic technique, specifically within his bold brushwork, very interesting.
I agree, Daisy. However, I was specifically drawn towards Jack's discussion on 19th century's exhibition culture as a whole, and that it was through the championing of artworks like The Birth of Venus that the exhibition culture of 19th century Paris sought to maintain the status quo and resist the tide of modernism and societal change.
Safe to say you've impressed us both, folks. We truly have reflected on the legacy of 19th century Parisian exhibition throughout this podcast, and it reminds us of the echoes of the past which continue to be present today.
You're absolutely right, and the lessons we have learnt from this era and the power of innovation remain as relevant today as they were a couple of centuries ago. Preservation or progression, it was such an influential time, don't you think, Daisy?
Oh, massively. I think it was both the preserved and progressive artworks that supplied it with its uniqueness as a century and its undeniable influence that we can still see in works today.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Jack and Katie. I hope we haven't caused too much feud between the two of you today.
Oh, never. That's the beauty of art historians. We love sharing our opinions and thoughts, but unlike politicians, we also love to hear others.
Well, it's safe to say we might not be getting many listeners from Parliament anytime soon.
Well, thank you to all our listeners for tuning in, and as always, a massive thank you to our visual analysis Phoebe for once again coming in and giving us and our listeners a delightful visual representation of our paintings discussed.
It's been a pleasure. Fab choice of artworks this week.
Hope it has inspired some of you to go and witness them in person next time you pop to Paris.
Super excited for next week's episode, so tune in for our discussion on the male gaze versus the Royal Academy with special guest Ed Burgess Watson.